I'm Dylan Kight, and this is No Destination, the stories behind the songs. This is episode 7. This is about Reasons to Run. Reasons to Run is an interesting song. It is the shortest song on the record. We've talked in previous episodes about how songs arrive in different ways. And as someone who really enjoys the writing process, there are times where I don't have an idea to start. So there are a couple different ways that I use to kind of work through basically just like lack of having an idea. So some people think that the only time I write is when inspiration strikes. I don't think people get struck that often, but I do think you got to keep showing up. And so there's a lot of methodology that people use. Like some is like they journal every day for 4 pages or how many ever 1,000 words, or, like a brain dump type thing where they just write. And no matter what it is, they have no thoughts about what is happening between the pen and the paper or the key and the screen. They write, and that's the goal. That works. I've never had a song come out of that, I will say. But it is a way to keep the practice up until there is that day where you do show up to the page and there is inspiration. Another thing I like to do is the sidecar, the idea. So it's where there's an idea of a song, a title of a song, and you're like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like to write a song from the opposite perspective that this song exists in. And that can be a real interesting perspective as a writer to try to harness. So Reasons to Run was a song that was actually inspired by a title of another song, which is called Reasons to Run. It's a song by a band called Old Crow Medicine Show. Now, that's not a band that I listen to ever, but I do pay attention when bands come out with things. Like, I'm a sucker for album titles and song titles. I had come across an article, like a press release, that this song was coming out. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting title, Reasons to Run. Now, I'm an avid runner. I love running. There have been times I've run more, and there have been times I've run less. But color me intrigued. And so I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I clicked on it. And it was all about running out of reasons to run was the song. Kind of like you're getting older, and you have less and less reasons to run. But the idea was an interesting starting point. Like, well, what are the reasons to run for me? And for me, it was way different. I took the approach of whether it's situational, relationships, you don't escape anything by just moving on to the next thing. The way I would frame this up is, like your first serious relationship, whatever that is. Hopefully it's not marriage, but sometimes it is, and you get one of those divorce t-shirts. And then everyone is surprised. And I mean, everyone is surprised when you get to your next relationship. And guess what, folks? Those same issues follow you, which means what? That's right. It was you all along. Now, there are certainly relationships that are one-sided and someone is more at fault or makes a mistake or whatever. We're not going to get into that. This isn't a relationship podcast because yours truly would not be awesome at that. But this idea for me was one that had come to me about my adult life. And so, the way I kind of interpreted it, because the idea of I'm just getting older and I'm running out of reasons to run, that doesn't resonate with me at all. Like, if anything, I'm speeding up. So that message means nothing to me. So good luck, Old Crow Medicine Show. I mean, they have wagon wheels, so I guess they've got a bunch of money that they can live off of. But what was interesting to me was to tell a version of my story of me realizing that maybe the faults that I would experience in multiple relationships, I had things I had to work on about myself. And there was this period of about 4 years where, before I met my wife, where I was single, and, I was doing what single guys do. And it was there's a lot of fun to be had when you're single, but it also runs its course. And it also gets exhausting, and it's just not a fulfilling thing for those people when you get to a certain age. And I'm not a Ronald Reagan fan. I wasn't very old at all when he was in office, so I can't tell you what it was like to live under it. I could read history books and tell you what they say about some of his economic policies. I think he talks about meeting Nancy and how it came in a really important part of his life because he wasn't womanizing, but he was just kind of moving person to person, and he was in a situation where he didn't know the person's name he was with. And that did resonate with me. Like, I was just kind of going through relationships just to go on dates and whatever. That was a version of a story I wanted to tell. In the first verse, you have, "Oh, beautiful, busted, wicked world, a kiss from the lips who just told you lies. And I fear what I feel, but not what I see with my eyes." So this thought that like what you feel is way more scary than anything in reality, right? Because like that's the thing you got to wrestle with. And like in Long Way Around, the choruses they propel the story. So each chorus is different, which means you're never going to hear it on the radio. Shocking, I know. The first chorus, "The reasons to run are the reasons to love, a universe of moments, but all we have is one, and the sun, the brightest light, casts shadows." And so just this idea of like, the reasons to run are the reasons to love. Like, you're trying to meet your person, or you're trying to meet somebody that you connect with. You only got one shot in this universe of things happening, because everybody's got their own experience. And it's a universe of all these things happening. But all you do is you just have one life. You just get one. And this idea that like the sun, the brightest light, casts shadows, was like a way to sum that up in a way that I thought worked really well. So we go on to the next portion, the second verse. "A room with a view, a city of lovers confused. We curse the hurt until we hurt again. Too concerned with what's next, we refuse what happiness brings." And so the thing I was trying to tap into was this thing that like before you find someone you resonate with, or yourself, there's people who find themselves and are like, "I'm great. I don't need to be partnered with anybody. Congratulations, you don't get a tax break, and you don't have anybody to help you pay bills." I kid. That's not all love and marriage is. This idea that when you're single as an adult, that everybody in a way, it's like a means to an end. Like you're trying to go on enough dates to find the right person or soulmate or significant other. And like there's so much into that. But at the same time, especially, goodness gracious, if you're doing online dating, God bless. That's a whole other topic. The thing that resonated with me is that like you're meeting all these people that are coming out of relationships that are hurt and broken from their own past. And I myself was exiting my relationship. I was living in the city at the time, a city of lovers confused. Because you meet all these people and everybody's just trying to figure themselves out or figure out whatever the perspective is. Like they're just trying to meet that person that's going to complete them or whatever it is. And that's just a common thread that I found among people that I met, right? And so like that idea resonated with me. But then we curse the hurt until we hurt again. Here's the crazy X story that I have. And then we do that, and then something else hurts us. And then we repeat that. That's the new story that we repeat or whatever. But too concerned with what's next, we refuse what happiness brings. And so like, at least what I noticed about myself is even though I was meeting all these people, like I wasn't ever really living in the moment as much as I thought I was because I was too concerned about the next thing. So we definitely talked about in episode 5 in Dark Water, which is part of my own deal. But I think back to I wasn't allowing myself to be present. And so I wasn't really happy, even when things were going well in these relationships that didn't amount to anything other than a couple dates or a couple months or whatever that was. And so too concerned with what's next, we refuse what happiness brings. And again, I just tie that back to the Dark Water experience. That's something I've struggled with as an adult, thinking to the next situation too often. And then the second chorus comes. The reasons to run are the reasons to stay. Ain't no mystery in throwing a good thing away. You'll cross the same mirror again. So this idea that, I'll just speak for myself, that you can just kind of hop person to person and not work on yourself. And I don't know if that was ever my deal. When you're dating people, you don't really know, like, what should I be holding on to? What should I be fighting for? If I'm fighting for anything, like, is this too early to fight for something? Like, should I, should it be easier, right? Again, overthinking. The city of lovers is confused, as I put it. For me, I just have to take accountability for my own self, right? There's no mystery in throwing a good thing away. Like, you're not getting really further ahead if you're not really working on yourself. And if it's a good thing and you're just moving on to the next thing because it's not as good as it used to be, or you're not sure if you should continue to work on it, you're going to cross the same mirror again. Meaning you're going to have to look yourself in the mirror again. And you're probably going to get to the point of like, oh, it's you again, my old friend, you. Life experience is really just trying to take ownership where I could, whether it's a band that didn't work out or a relationship. This part of my life, like, I had to own that I was too busy thinking ahead and looking at what's next. I wasn't focused on if I was happy or not. And I was more than willing to move on to the next situation. I wasn't doing enough self-reflection. So that's something on me. Now, you could also say that maybe, Dylan, you just hadn't found your person yet. So it's not all your fault. And that's definitely part of it. Everybody finds a person, hopefully. Or if it's just you, and you love that, good for you. And hopefully you feel great about that. But there's something to be said that maybe those things didn't work out because it wasn't supposed to. So there's also that thought, right? I don't know. I'm not Dr. Phil. I might have a similar haircut. So we get to this third and final chorus. The reasons to run are the reasons to change. It's yourself you're healing. It's yourself that gets in the way. There ain't nothing we can't overcome. Some would say it's a double negative. And they're right. But poetic license, maybe? I think so. But yeah, again, so we've gone through the cycle a couple times in the song where it's like realizing that maybe I'm the constant in these situations. And so the reasons to run are whatever is propelling me to that next thing, whether it's looking ahead, whether it's not sure if this is something I should be fighting for, whatever it is. Ultimately, it's me that I should be healing. And ultimately, it's me that gets in the way. But there ain't nothing that we can't overcome. Like, I think people are so fragile. And not in the sense that, like, we're not tough, but that we all should have a space to figure stuff out. That doesn't mean we should look past bad behavior or people being inconsiderate or not thoughtful. The space to make, mistakes, and hopefully the space to make those situations right. And there were times where, like, I did call people back and I was like, I'm sorry, I was a jerk. I should have called you back. I should have, like, whatever. And that was just a part of me wanting to grow up and wanting to be accountable to myself. Because it was me that I was healing. I'd lost my dad. I'd gone through a divorce. That had all happened in a week, the same week, right? Or not the divorce, but like the separation and losing my dad, that had happened in the same week. And it took me years to work through that. And I was still me. I was a version of me, but I was needing to do a lot more work on myself. And the song acknowledges that. And so the song ends with 2 lines from previous verses. Oh, you beautiful, busted, wicked world, a room with a view, a city of lovers confused. This nod that even though I've figured out myself to a certain extent, there's still that same situation happening over and over again for other people, right? Other people are going through things, figuring themselves out, being hurt, hurting other people, moving on, and the cycle just kind of repeats. And so the reasons to run for Old Crow Medicine Show, I assume, based on their lyrics, were a very specific thing. But the reasons to run was more of a way to kind of hold me accountable as someone who hadn't really slowed down enough and either enjoyed the moment, been present, or realized that, hey, bozo, it's you that's not being awesome all the time. And hopefully that's growth, right? Sonically is probably like the catchiest in a way. Like, that was very unintentional. But it's got like this kind of like quirky 60s pop thing going for it. It's really not like anything on the record. It's kind of this weird sonic thing The main guitar on the song is this old acoustic that was at the studio that was strung Nashville tuning, which is wild. If you're a guitar player, you probably have some familiarity with Nashville tuning. Is weird because there's different gauge strings. It's meant to replicate like the sound of a 12 string, but you have the intonation and tuning reliability of like a normal 6-string guitar. But in a recording, it has that effect of sounding like a 12 string beautifully. And so it sounded great on the record because I was like, this seems so high. On a 12 string, you have a really thin string and then the normal version of the string. I can't remember the order. Not a Nashville tuning expert, but that kind of made the song sit in a very interesting place. There was a couple songs that didn't make the record. This was one of the songs that was at the very last minute added back in because of the story that I told, because I think it's an important part of how I found myself and the journey that I had to go on as a person, that it takes time to figure yourself out and you have to give yourself a little grace. The other thing that happened with Reasons to Run is I wrote this song on a baritone guitar. So we talked about the Nashville tuning a little bit and that being a really unique sounding acoustic guitar. There's a couple songs that were inspired by a baritone that I got at the very beginning of this process. So I had befriended one of the Fender master builders, Carlos Lopez, and him and I had Instagram messaged a couple times when he was still at Fender because he was doing some really crazy stuff. And he had worked with some artist guitars, or guitars for artists that I think Delta Spirit was one. He'd done stuff for everybody, like Robbie Robertson of the band, all this stuff. At some point, he ventured out onto his own to create his own guitar company, which is a fantastic guitar company called Castadosa. When he made the announcement on Instagram that he was starting his own guitar company, I was like, hey man, I want to play one of your guitars. And I had to sell a couple guitars to make that happen. But this baritone was wild. I'd had a baritone before that was cool, but nothing like this Contra's baritone that I had. The first thing I wrote on it, I didn't bring this up in the Pulaski episode 3 video, but the first thing that I wrote on that guitar was Pulaski. I mean, the original demo and everything is that baritone guitar. It's just such an inspiring instrument. Another song that I wrote was Reasons to Run. We actually put everything in standard tuning for this song. But the original idea and music, because it had all the same foundation as far as like the parts and the melody, it was just recorded in B standard tuning, which is real low. And so it just sounded a little bit better on the recording to be in standard tuning, E standard tuning. But this Contra's baritone is something special. So not only did a couple of songs get written on this guitar, Gilded Age was another one that actually started on the baritone. So the last song on the record was written on this Castadosa guitar. So 3 songs right there that just purely inspired by the relationship that I had with this instrument. I don't name my guitars. I'm not against people naming their guitars. It's just not my thing. There's also this other thing like, I gotta come up with like a girl name. Like, I don't know. It all seems a little weird to me, maybe a little dated. I mean, but you can name your guitar whatever you would like. I'm just not that person. But if there were ever a guitar I would name it, it might be this one because it was so pivotal to the record. So that whole riff on Gilded Age, that da 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 da, that was written on the baritone guitar. And the same thing with the chords. So the other thing that the baritone guitar did is it made some of the songs sonically sound just great. So aside from the ones I've already told you about, Gilded Age has the baritone. Obviously, Pulaski, the main guitar in that is the baritone. The other one, while I wrote Worst of Me on this old classic guitar that I have over here, classical guitar, not classic, but classical guitar. And there's actually a cool story about that one. So during COVID, I bought it from Carter's Vintage for like $600 or $700. It wasn't a lot, but it belonged to Sturgill Simpson, this classical guitar. And it's not a very like expensive one. It's not like name brand wise. It's not like one that you'd heard of because there's classical guitars that go for like tens of thousands of dollars. So I'm not sure if it's a toy, but when I bought it from Carter, and they're reputable, great. One of the premier shops in the country, and Sturgill has sold stuff through Carter Vintage too, before amps, guitars, all that stuff. And so I bought it because I'm a huge Sturgill Simpson fan. But Worst of Me came on that guitar. That was one of the first things I wrote on that guitar. But when we went in the studio, Worst of Me was in this very specific place. It sounded good. Like it, it was definitely doing a thing. But when I added the baritone, that all of a sudden it sounded so much wider. It just sounded like now there was this kind of like, it almost felt like an organ, but there's not. I mean, there is some stuff on there, but it made it sound like the song kind of lived on this high sonic highway now, because the baritone is so open and kind of creates this bed. And it's a big reason why it's the first song on the record, because in my opinion, what that specific guitar ended up doing for that song and those big open low chords really brought it to life. Something in the Darkness also has the baritone on it. So I used it on a lot of the songs. I wrote a lot of the songs on it. Carlos and I have become friends, before that. And, so to be able to play someone's instrument that was made with a lot of love is an honor. And he's a great guy. His wife winds all the pickups that go in their guitars. And I've been fortunate to own a couple. My main 2 guitars right now are the Castadosa Contra's baritone and the Black Mariana. So the album release, some of the live videos that we put out have a black guitar with a mastery and 2 humbuckers. That is also a Castadosa guitar. And that is my go-to live electric main guitar that I play with. It just sounds great. And it interacts fantastic with a Benson Vincent that I have, which, we talked about how inspiring that Contras was and how I think pivotal on the record. It sonically changed some of those songs to sound as interesting as they do. The Benson amps are, in my opinion, my favorite amps going. And there's a lot of great amp. I mean, we live in the best timeline for music equipment. Let's just say that. It's a golden age of music gear. Great pedals, great guitars, great amps. And I've been fortunate to own a lot of different cool stuff. I have to trade it or sell it to be able to buy something else. You can't keep them all, as they say. There's some weird part of me that wants to try a lot of them. The Benson amps, I came aware of them through Daniel Seraph, who is a great jazz guitar player in Western North Carolina. And he sold me his Benson Chimera. That was my first introduction into their amps. I've owned every Benson and sold it to buy another Benson just to see like sonically how they're different. But that is the core of the live sound, is the Benson Vincent and that Castadosa Mariana just do something really special together. I'm not a big fan of super bright guitars, but there's just something that's so immediate about the attack of that amp. And there's something so warm about that guitar that it's just perfect. Benson amps were a big part of the record. The other amps that were heavily used were my Magnatone Panoramic. It's a 210 amp with stereo tremolo. We use that on a lot of rhythm guitars. It just kind of makes this great. You can mic both speakers and has the stereo tremolo that sounds great. That Matchless made it onto a lot of the recordings, as well as my green Frank Brothers Arcade. Another one of my favorite guitars, was on a lot of records. The great thing about the gear world right now is if you get into some of these smaller shops, you become friendly with these folks. I wouldn't call them all my friends, not because they're not friendly, but because they probably have real friends that they have in their life. But Chris Benson at Benson Amps, I mean, I've probably owned every Benson. And behind me is a Redland and then a Vincent. That's the 2x12 cab, and that's the 1x12 cab. And in the other room, I have a custom Nathan Jr. Benson amp. But, Carlos Castadosa, and Frank, the Frank brothers. So I've been fortunate to own 2 Frank brothers guitars, and they're fantastic. They're out of Canada. Such sweet, warm guys. I spec'd those out. And it is not easy to spec out your own guitar. I know it sounds like a dream, because it is at first. But it's kind of like really wanting a dessert and then like going to an ice cream shop and having to pick one flavor and then like what toppings you want on it. Like it all looks good. And so you're like, well, how do I do this? Because if I design this, like what I told the guys at Frank Brothers, like if I design this guitar with no input or like without being reined in, it would be like that car that Homer Simpson designed. And then like there's like a parent pod in the front, so you didn't have to hear the kids. But it was like a Frankenstein car and like never was released. But in concept, like all the individual ideas were good. That's what it's like speccing out your own custom guitar a lot of the time. and my personal experience, is you pick all these things that you think are going to be great, and then you get it and it's like, wah, wah. And not because the builder does a bad job necessarily. And almost every time the builder did exactly what I was hoping to do. It's not, when it comes to the sum of all of its parts, it doesn't come together in the way that you think it's going to, in the way that it's going to inspire you. But the Frank Brothers guys have been phenomenal. They've been able to rein me in every time. But that green arcade Frank Brothers that I have, I use that live a lot last year, and that is the main rhythm guitar, electric guitar on a lot of those songs too. So really fortunate to have become friends, or have a working relationship with a lot of those smaller boutique guys. But that's a little bit behind the gear that made some of these songs and that inspired these songs. And that's not in a way to say that like you need to get a boutique guitar. I played the same Epiphone Sheraton for a really long time. I had an Epiphone Sheraton, and I had a couple different amps along the way. I think I got that Epiphone when I was in middle school. I still have it, by the way. And I had everything done. I swapped out the pickups. I had the wiring redone. I had a bone nut put on the guitar. That guitar literally did everything with me for 15 to 20 years. Like, that was my main electric guitar. I had other ones that kind of came and went, but that was my main guitar. And my main amp during that period was an AC30. Nothing special. I don't know if it was from England or China or wherever, but it sounded great. And I used that one amp and that guitar for at least 10 of those years, and I never thought twice about it. So in this chapter of my musical journey, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of very cool people that are very passionate about the things they make, and that's been a really cool part of the journey for me. You could find a lot of inspiration and a lot of really cool stuff anywhere, and there's never been a better time to get into a musical instrument. So if you're wanting to play guitar, there is a great guitar pretty much at every price point, in my opinion. But listen, if you don't want to play music, then just listen to my music. It's fine. I'll make music for you. But I do think music is something it's something that you can always have. So if you're interested, I definitely encourage you. And big shout out to all the makers who went out on their own, did something really scary, and started a company to make things that inspired other people to make their art. And I was very inspired making this record with all those different folks. Guys, this has been episode 7, Reasons to Run. Can you believe it? The shortest song now has the longest podcast. That wasn't intentional. Thank you so much for being a part of this. These are the stories that connect the through line of the record and give you perspective through my experience making this record. If you like these videos, if you find it helpful, funny, or useful, go ahead, hit that like and subscribe, share with a friend. It goes a long way to spreading the word. Because again, even though there's only 10 songs on Late Bloomer and Wallflower Suit, this is just the beginning of our little podcast here between us. So again, until next time.